If you reduce your sets intuitively, you will save yourself countless injuries. If instead of using fixed sets, you use set ranges and intuition, your body will thank you. What is a training injury and why does it happen in the first place? A training injury is simply a damaged joint, tissue, tendon, or muscle, and it happens in three circumstances. The first one is that the body is not ready for the training you expose it to. Example, maximum load with an exercise you have never done or very rarely do. Number 2, the training you do causes you more damage than the body can heal. Example, training the same exercise 7 days of the week with a high load and a lot of sets. 3, a combination of 1 and 2. If you have self-control and good form, you don't need to worry about number 1. However, the tricky thing comes into number 2. You might get injured if you train too many days, if you do too many sets and reps, or if you use a really heavy load. The truth is that injuries do not happen if only one of these are true. At least 2 of these 3 conditions need to happen at the same time for an injury to happen. Training with a high load is not in itself going to injure you. However, if you train every day with a high load, you are much more likely to get injured. Training every day with a light load and low amount of sets is not going to injure you. Training with a lot of sets per day but with a light load and 2 days per week is not going to injure you. Then what should you change? You shouldn't change your frequency because it might completely change your whole training, unless you are willing to change it. Also, we can assume that your frequency is okay because most training programs, regardless of intention, will not ask you to train the same thing 4 days per week. You shouldn't change the load you intend to reach or do because it might also mess up your training. For example, there is not a lot of sense in doing 5 reps with a comfortable load as your main form of training. However, there is one thing that you can change that will not drastically change your training approach and training program, and that is the amount of sets you do. It doesn't matter if you train 7 days per week or 3 days, if you do mostly light loads or heavy loads. You can reduce the amount of sets you do without any drastic change in your training approach. I've always been injury prone. I've been injured a lot, and since I started simply reducing my sets according to how I feel, I've never been better. And it is partly because general training programs are incomplete and mediocre. When you think about what a training program is and you compare it to the reality of your body, what I just said starts making sense. A training program is simply a layout on how you should train with fixed reps and sets. It is a complete abstraction that may ignore the reality of our own bodies, and within that reality, our individual differences may vary a lot. If you use a training program from the internet that is made for a large number of people, something is missing. That is your own reaction, input, and rate of adaptation to that training. There is a reality that nobody can deny. People are different. You can call it genetics or God or fate, but regardless of the processes, some people simply adapt faster to training while others don't do it as fast. This is why the best training program is the one that you make for yourself after having training experience, because it is the training program with the most input from yourself. The training program that you took from the internet may disregard this reality entirely. The training program might be too challenging for you or too little. The only way to find out is to test it. And in most of these training programs, sets are fixed, and this, in my opinion, causes some problems. When I say that sets are fixed, I mean that if the training program says that you will do a set of whatever, then that is what you are going to do. You are going to follow the program. There is no variation. The sets are fixed. In contrast, the heaviness or load of an exercise can be individually changed and adjusted with a rate of perceived exertion load, 9 being your 1 rep max and the rest of numbers being a percentage. A training program can ask you to do 12 reps of a 50% of your 1 rep max, and because the load is a percentage, it individually adjusts to each person. However, is there a maximum amount of sets? How do you even test that or put that into a percentage? You cannot, because a set is simply a mix of reps, a specific exercise, and a load. A set can mean a lot of things. Since it is not an objective thing like a load, it cannot be put into a percentage. This means that the amount of sets you do cannot be individually adjusted into a program from a third party. You need your own individual input to know if 8 or 16 sets are enough to see adaptation or if they will injure you. And in my own experience, the amount of sets that can give you the most results in the short term is also the amount of sets that can also give you the most damage in the long run, which can transform into an injury. Let's say that after knowing the flaws of general training programs, you start experimenting with sets. You increase your sets to 12 per training session for exercises that involve the anterior deltoids. You notice faster adaptation. Your numbers are increasing, but after 3 weeks of doing 12 sets, you start noticing that your strength is uneven throughout training sessions. You feel more tired than usual, and you start feeling discomfort in your shoulders. If this keeps happening, it is an obvious sign that the 12 sets you are doing aren't sustainable in the long run. Then, what should you do? There are two ways you can choose that both involve the decrease of sets. The first option is periodization. Periodization is simply long-term planning or a long-term training program, as opposed to normal muscle or strength building programs that only last the 7 days of the week and tend to be simple and easy to follow. Periodization may last 3 months or a year or even more, and within that time frame, there are constant changes in exercises, the amount of sets you do, the frequency you do, the effort you do, and the load you do. The priorities and goals that you are pursuing might also change. Without need for more explanation, periodization basically deals with all your training problems by consistently changing your training and training variables. Virtually all pro athletes do some sort of periodization. However, most of them have thousands of dollars behind them with teams that can manage their training and consistently check on them. Most people do not have such resources behind them, and making periodization can be a complex task that is a pain in the ass. A pain in the ass that also requires knowledge and a lot of self-experience. And honestly, if the athletes didn't need to follow what their trainer asked them to do, they probably wouldn't willingly do periodization. Instead, this is what you can do. You can use set ranges, intuition, and self-regulation. After knowing the amount of sets that you see a lot of progress with, but might be currently unsustainable for you right now, in this example 12 sets, instead of doing 12 fixed sets, you can use set ranges. Let's say that you arrive at your training and after doing your warm-up, you don't feel as good. In that case, you can simply decrease 1/4 of your 12 sets, which will give you 9 sets, or you can decrease it to 1/3, which will give you 8 sets, or in the worst of cases, you can decrease it to 1/2 of 12, giving you 6 sets. You can reduce your sets until you feel really great and go back to 12 sets, giving you a set range of 6 to 12 sets per training session that you can manage according to how you feel instead of a fixed 12 sets. You can even increase the ceiling to 16 sets when you feel in your prime, giving you a set range of 6 to 16 sets per training session that you can manage according to your feelings. 12 sets being your goal set that may be unsustainable in the long run, and anything below 12 sets is what you default to when you start getting signs of too many sets, and 16 sets are the ceiling that you rarely go to. The set range I just gave is just an example, but you can use this example and apply it to your own training. There are some signs that are telling you that you need to reduce your sets. Having inconsistent strength. If you feel that 2 or 4 days per week that your strength is highly inconsistent without you intending to, then it is a sign that you need to reduce your sets or that you need more rest. Feeling generally weaker or a really tired nervous system. If you feel that you consistently lack energy, then you may reduce your sets. Always waking up with stiff joints. Feeling discomfort in your joints. There are some disadvantages from using set ranges and intuition for beginners. They might not know their limits or be sure about what they are doing, which can distort the assessment of their feelings. Some beginners might not be doing enough, but because they have no point of comparison, they cannot tell which is which. They need fixed sets and reps because they need the certainty of somebody telling them what to do exactly. They don't want to experiment or take the time to get experience. Regardless of the disadvantages, it is still good for beginners to start using their intuition and experiment with the amount of sets they do. Using set ranges, intuition, and self-regulation is, in my opinion, a very straightforward way to avoid injury that a lot of people could benefit from. Before every training, you should ask yourself how you feel, and after warming up, you can decide what to actually do.